evening, everyone, and welcome to the April 2nd meeting of the Ann Arbor City Council. If you're able, please rise and join us for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Would our clerk please call the roll of council?
Councilmember Kalasapathy?
Here.
Councilmember Bannister?
Here.
Councilmember Westfall?
Here.
Councilmember Lum? Councilmember Gran?
Here.
Councilmember Ackerman?
Here.
Mayor Taylor?
Here.
Councilmember Eaton?
Here.
Councilmember Crapel?
Here.
Councilmember Warpowski?
Here.
Councilmember Smith?
Present.
We have a quorum.
May I have a motion, please, to approve the agenda? Moved by Councilmember Ackerman, seconded by Councilmember Gran. Discussion of the agenda. With your approval, I'd like to put the closed session prior to DC 1. Without objection. Further alterations to the agenda?
Should we move DB1 before DC1 then? Just to get, if there's any staff here to speak to it.
Perfect. Any objection to moving we'll move DB1 prior to the closed session? Further alterations? All in favor of the agenda as amended?
Aye.
All opposed? The altered agenda is approved. Do we have any communications today from our city administrator?
No, we do not.
We now come to public comment reserve time. Public comment reserve time is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to council and the community about matters of municipal interest. To speak at public comment reserve time, one needs to have signed up in advance by contacting our city clerk. Speakers have 3 minutes in which to speak, so please pay close attention to the time clock. As a matter of courtesy, we may have only one person speaking at a time. Finally, if you require assistance in speaking before council, we'd be delighted to provide it to you. Our first speaker today is David Silkworth. Our next speaker today is Adil Golim.
Hi, my name is Hadil Hunim, and I'm here as a representative of an Arab American parent support group. Our children all go to Ann Arbor Public Schools, and today I am here to inform you all of some events that we've been helping other organizations in Ann Arbor, like the Ann Arbor Public Library and the schools, and also Neutral Zone, in celebration of Arab American Heritage Month. It's a national thing, apparently, and in Ann Arbor, we're happy to celebrate it as well. So, if you don't mind, I'll just go through some of the events so you would, so everybody would notice. In Neutral Zone on Thursday, April 5th, there's going to be an Arab night for teens with dancing and food and poetry, and it's been organized by our teens. And there are 3 or 4 more other events that Ann Arbor Public Library has organized, and one of them is going to be a book display on the second floor of Arab American authors, and there's also going to be an Arab food demonstration on April 9th, on Monday. And on April 13th, there's going to be an Arabica concert by a dance performer. And there's also going to be a film screening on April 22nd. So still have 1 minute. So I just want to thank these organizations, thank our schools that really helped us do this for our kids and because we were really, we're happy to be raising our kids in a city that respects diversity and multiculturalism, and having 1 month to celebrate Arab American heritage away from all the bad news that we hear about. So thank you for listening.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kathy Griswold.
Good evening. evening. I'll be very brief this evening. This is my visual aid, which I've shown before, and things really haven't changed much since then. 3 quick questions. Why do we have school crosswalks without any lighting or illumination? This is what some of our school crosswalks look like. Number 2, why are new crosswalks being installed without adequate lighting? A light in a tree is not adequate when the leaves are out. And one of those examples is Huron near Rackham. You cannot see the pedestrians on the north side of the street. And finally, will the 2009 budget include dollars for adequate illumination at all of our crosswalks, given that we have new low-cost options with solar and LED? Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jonah Coffey.
Good evening. Members of council and staff, I appreciate your time. Here to talk about a letter that was received from Community Services Area Administrator Derek Delacourt. First, I'd like to say I'm a resident of the 4th Ward. However, I'm also a property manager at 321 East Liberty on behalf of my uncle, which is in the 1st Ward. And this letter that was received is indicating that there will be a resolution on April 16th that would rescind all prior resolutions that allow for special event temporary outdoor sales on private property. Essentially, this is during art fair. And this is already somewhat of a difficult time to have a property or a business in downtown. The revenue that is used from that is used to pay down property taxes. I know this is the case for my uncle as well as various, at least 2 to 3 of our neighbors downtown. The property taxes on this particular location are approximately $25,000 per year, of which a small portion is able to be paid by the revenue that's generated by renting this space out during art fair. If it is April now and we have just a few months before it would be art fair coming and basically have been budgeting to be able to pay these property taxes for the year based on the fact that there would be some revenue coming in from that. So I would encourage you all to take some time to consider this, and please consider either voting no on this resolution or at least postponing it until a time when residents, property owners would be able to budget for this and able to pay those property taxes, which are very significant. I appreciate your time with this. I'll definitely be following up with Mr. Delacourt as well, but I at least wanted to get it on your radar so that you're aware of it and we can at least provide adequate time for folks to take this into consideration. Again, I think it'll be on the agenda on April 16th, so I greatly appreciate your time and consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lafiste Gallimore.
Good evening. Greetings to the mayor, the city council, and the staff and my fellow citizens that are here to voice their concerns tonight. First of all, I would like to express my appreciation to the mayor that he did meet with me individually to discuss some of the concerns that I have regarding the composition of the police task force. And I would like to go on record as saying that I still have those concerns, even after meeting with him and speaking with him about my concerns. Number one is that I thought that this was supposed to be a resident task force. And as it turns out, there are people that do not live in Ann Arbor that are part of this particular task force, even though they may work in Ann Arbor. They do not live here, and I thought this was a citizens task force to be comprised of individuals that live, raise families, pay taxes here, and have a vested interest in this community and the quality of life of this community. The composition of the task force, I still think that the composition of the task force does not adequately represent the interests of the community. And so I think that that's something that as you move forward on this, that you need to give some very specific consideration to the composition of this particular group. And also the leadership of the group. For example, I thought whenever a group came together, they would select their leadership. But as it turns out, it seems that the council or the mayor decided to elect who they wanted to be the leaders of the group. that, you know, I don't have a problem with that, but I do have a problem with the process, because what that tells me is that there's a vested interest on behalf of those that are in an authoritative position to select the outcome of what this particular task force is going to be about. So I do have a concern about that, and that's something that I'm going to be paying specific attention to as this group moves forward. But I do think that, it's long overdue, and I would like to commend the council for moving forward to establish this task force, because it is it's probably one of the most significant committees that has been put together by this group in a very long time. So I do support the effort. I just want to let you know that. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lisa Abrams.
Good evening. We are at a time in history when wildlife habitat is being taken away from deer and other wildlife at unprecedented rates, fueled by developers and city laws and politicians aligned with developers. Residents of Ann Arbor have experienced the consequences of lost wildlife habitat as deer have been forced to live closer to humans. There are tens of thousands of Ann Arbor residents who are in favor of peaceful solutions to living with deer and other wildlife. Sound public policy includes their viewpoints and peaceful solutions. This city council has voted to spend upwards of $1 million thus far in establishing a deer mismanagement program. And where has it gotten us? This is our tax money, and we don't want it used for killing. You are putting private interests of a few complaining residents over the public good and harming us all. You are forcing us to pay for their wants and desires, thus socializing the cost for what they want. We taxpayers are footing the bill for the hunting agenda in Michigan. This is what we all want. We want our roads fixed. We want the potholes fixed. So people aren't spending thousands of dollars each winter repairing our cars when we accidentally hit potholes. You abdicate your responsibilities for road repair, pointing fingers at the state or the feds, but yet you have the power to do more than you are doing for us. Spend the millions of dollars you have spent on deer mismanagement on road repair. Spend it on pedestrian and bicycle safety so that we can all feel safe walking and biking in our community. Spend it on helping the homeless and others in need. That is what we all want. We don't want guns in our neighborhoods. We don't want sharpshooters killing wildlife next door to us. So why is the public confused about deer mismanagement? It's not the public's fault. You set unrealistic goals and objectives for the program. 75% citywide acceptance of deer mismanagement admittedly was a made-up number. And what are the people supposed to be accepting? Killing in our neighborhoods is not safe. Spending our tax dollars on phony, made-up program is a disgrace. Just like our roads are a national disgrace. Our roads are a national disgrace. Mahatma Gandhi said, "There is not a single cause I am willing to kill for." There is not a single cause Ann Arbor should kill for. The chance to make a real difference is not just someday, it is now.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Eric Lipson.
Hi, good to see you all. I'm Eric Lipson. I live in the 4th Ward, and I'm here to talk about a few things. First, I'd like to congratulate you on retaining Mr. Lazarus. He's been, in the opinion of many people, an excellent city administrator, and my interactions with him have always been excellent, so good job there. The 3 things or 4 things I'd like to talk about today. One is buyback of the lot, the Y lot. I agree it should be purchased back from the buyer. I think you should pay the full price that he paid for the reason that the impairment of value of the lot and its market value is a great deal in a function of the buses that have surrounded it during the business day, which is legal, but would send a message to any potential developer there that it's going to be difficult to do business there if the poor planning by AATA in undersizing the transit center was then put off on the neighbor. So I would encourage you to buy it back and then comprehensively plan for that lot. There was when I was on Planning Commission, there was a proposal for a twin tower with affordable housing and market rate and affordable housing, and that got torpedoed for reasons we don't have to go into now. But in any event, I think you should do that, and also add the Y lot in there, and I should say the library lot. Also, I understand you're considering zoning changes, my second topic. I would just advise you to have a really, really, really thorough process there. I've seen a lot of the zoning changes that have been made in the past few years have had unanticipated consequences, which have resulted in things like the Foundry Lofts, which is much larger than anyone anticipated could be built on that site and is inappropriate, and the Packard Square, which is another completely outsized development in our ward, which I think is going to have, when it is completed, will have an outsized impact. It's so out of character with the neighborhood. I think density is a great thing. A great thing, especially for transportation. And the saving grace of that site is that it's right on the best bus line in Ann Arbor. The 5 runs past it like every 15 minutes. The third thing I'd like to talk about is the Victor's Walk, which is something that I proposed a while ago. I'm not going to talk about it much, except that it's a town-gown collaboration that would result in a walkway that people had their own names in a brick in exchange for donating to a cause which would be pedestrian safety. It would be a creative way, I think, to have a town-gown collaboration and to fund voluntarily something we all believe in. And finally, I agree with Kathy Griswold. There's no excuse, no bureaucratic inertia is an excuse for losing another life for lack of installing lights at crosswalks. And thank you, Kathy.
Thank you. With council's acquiescence, I'll note that Mr. Silkworth has joined us, and there are no alternatives to public comment. So, Mr. Silkworth, without a clamor in opposition, you have the floor.
Good evening. My name is David Silkworth, and I'm a resident of Ward 5 in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I want to share some insights from Fifth Ward voters that I hope you'll agree were relevant to tonight's resolution to amend the city budget to borrow money in order to provide funds to repurchase the Y lot. During my conversation with residents over the last 2 years, many of them have told me that they don't want our city government to engage in what they feel are speculative real estate transactions like this one. They would prefer that our city government work with or assist private parties in realizing their stated development goals as permitted by the zoning that's currently allowed, and in this case, in the agreement that the city formed with them. A lot of residents and business owners believe that we're living in turbulent times, both nationally and locally, and they'd like to see our city government try to work cooperatively with both governmental and other governmental entities, with residents, and with business owners to try to reach a consensus on important issues like this one. To be honest, I wasn't sure whether or not providing this information to council would have any effect on the outcome tonight or on how this issue will ultimately be resolved. But then I recalled that something that Councilmember Warpowski said at a recent council meeting. And at that meeting, he was explaining his support for the approval of the recent raise for our city administrator. And he said, and please forgive me and correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't want to mischaracterize what you were saying. But I think he shared that he had dug in his heels on some particular issue. But Mr. Lazarus had worked with him so that he had a better understanding of the issue, which helped him overcome his initial opposition to it. He helped him to get to a yes. I hope that was the right yes. And that's a really important admission by him, and I want to thank him for that example, which shows us all a simple truth. We're all human beings. It shows that even an Ann Arbor City Council person can make a mistake. And it also shows, at least on that issue, how after receiving good advice from staff, he was able to learn from and overcome his initial opposition to it. Ann Arbor is such a great community. And one of the things that I've learned is that we are strongest when we're working collaboratively toward common goals for a common good. Knowing this makes me think that there must be some middle path that could be followed that might lead us to a more amicable solution for all parties involved here. I urge you to reject the current plan to borrow this $4.2 million to repurchase the land from the owner at at that value, and instead to work toward the right kind of yes. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. Are there communications from council? Councilmember Bannister.
I just want to announce that at next Monday's meeting, I will be out of town, so it's a financial literacy month in our country for April, so I'll be going to DC to participate in Financial Literacy Month. I'll miss Monday's meeting and also Thursday's Housing and Human Services Advisory Board meeting.
Further communication from council. Councilmember Wojciechowski.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. Council may remember that last year we challenged the County Board of Commissioners to a blood battle to see which board could get a higher participation of participants donating blood to the Red Cross. I don't like to gloat, but we really walloped them. And so the prize for the blood battle was that the winning body would be able to get the losing body to participate in a park work day of the winner's choice. So on April 28th, from 12 to 2 p.m., the County Board of Commissioners has been invited to participate in some rain garden maintenance over at West Park. And I think it would be a good show, now that I've gloated, it would be a good show of sportsmanship if council also joined in that work day. So if you'd like to participate, please RSVP to adopt-a-park at a2gov.org. And we will also be sharing this workday with the general public so that the population at large can see that their elected officials from across the county and from across the city are willing to roll up their sleeves, get a little bit dirty maybe, and do some work for the community as a whole.
Further communication from council. I have no communications today. We now come to our consent agenda. May I have a motion, please, to approve the consent agenda? Moved by Councilmember Crapel, seconded by Councilmember Smith. Discussion of the consent agenda. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? The consent agenda is approved unanimously with 10 council members present, thus satisfying the 8-vote requirement with respect to CA3. And CA13. We now come to a public hearing. Public hearings are opportunities for members of the public to speak to council and the community about specific items on the agenda. To speak at a public hearing, your speech must relate to the specific item on the agenda, the specific item of the subject matter of the public hearing. Speakers have 3 minutes in which to speak, so please pay close attention to the time clock. As a matter of courtesy, we may have only one person speaking at a time, and to speak at a public hearing, remember, you need not have signed up in advance. Finally, if you require assistance in speaking before council, we'd be delighted to provide it to you. Public hearing number 1, an ordinance to amend Chapter 55, zoning of 10.44 acres from TWP Township District to PL Public Land, 1200 and 1400 Chalmers Drive. Is there anyone who would like to speak at this public hearing? Seeing no one, this public hearing is closed. A1, work in special. We now have before us the work in special session minutes of March 12 and the regular session meeting minutes of March 19. We have a motion, please, to approve the minutes. Moved by Councilmember Ackerman, seconded by Councilmember Westfall. Discussion of the minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The minutes are approved. B1, an ordinance, is that right? Yes, B1, an ordinance to amend Chapter 55, zoning of 10.44 acres from TWP Township District to PL Public Land, 1200 and 1400 Chalmers Drive. Moved by Councilmember Ackerman, seconded by Councilmember Grand. Discussion of B1. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It's approved. C1, an ordinance to amend sections 5.1 and 5.10.4 of Chapter 55, zoning of the Code of the City of Ann Arbor, to modify the definition of fraternity or sorority house and amend corresponding special exception use standards. Moved by Councilmember Ackerman, seconded by Councilmember Westfall. Discussion, please, of C1. Councilmember Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am glad to be bringing this forward. We're blessed to live in a community that is home to a world-class university. With a world-class university comes great young minds who will one day be the leaders and the best in this country and in this world. Also, having young residents be our neighbors can come with some headaches, some sleepless nights, and nowhere is that more pronounced than in areas surrounding fraternities and sororities. The 3rd Ward and 2nd Ward house the majority of them. Fraternities and sororities provide an opportunity for young people to live in a group housing situation, and on their face are no sin. However, like any group of young minds, situations can get out of hand. This zoning ordinance amendment would require that fraternities and sororities be recognized by the university in order for their special exemption uses to move forward. Currently, only one zoning district, R2B, allows fraternities, sororities, and cooperative housing to be permitted, but only with a vote of the majority of the city's planning commission to grant a special exemption use. The result of this would be no property in the R2B district would be allowed to be converted into a fraternity, sorority, or cooperative without the recognition of the University of Michigan. While only 6 such applications have been processed since 2008, what is most impactful about this change is that according to our zoning code, a use under a special exemption use needs to be continued. And if after 2 years that use hasn't been continued on a site, the zoning reverts and the special exemption use goes away with it. This means that should a fraternity or sorority, and most often a fraternity, lose its recognition from the university, which is usually in extreme cases. We're talking about things like sexual assault, things like hazing. These are bad actors who lose their recognition from the university. That property would need to would need to replace that fraternity or sorority with a recognized group within 2 years, or that zoning would go away. It's another tool that the university and the city has to curb dangerous and criminal behavior. Organizations who are abiding by the law and being good neighbors have absolutely nothing to be concerned about. It's those who are perpetrating a culture of sexual assault and of hazing who are at risk of losing university recognition and so losing the zoning code that allows them to operate and live on a property. This is the first reading. I would look to my colleagues' support. It's taken about a year to get to this point, but glad it's moving forward.
Further discussion of C1? Councilmember Westfall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick clarification. Does this also have the effect of specifying density restrictions in perpetuity?
If I could.
Please.
So currently with a special exemption use, we would, under this new ordinance, we would set the total number of individuals, unrelated adults, to live on the property. Any amendments to that number would come with another special exemption use hearing. So once a special exemption use is passed and we set a number of, say, 18 unrelated adults are allowed to live on the property, which is fairly typical, I think they would be maxed at 18 unless they came back to Planning Commission.
Thank you.
Further discussion of C1? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It's approved. C2, an ordinance to amend Chapter 55 zoning, rezoning of 4.52 acres from PL Public Land District to R1A Single Family Dwelling District. 2301 Highland Road rezoning, 2301 Highland Road. Moved by Councilmember Westfall, second by Councilmember Ackerman. Discussion of C2, Councilmember Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would be remiss if I didn't say something for Councilmember Lum, who is cheering on our team at the final. This is the Inglis House. It is one of the most historically significant properties in the city's limits, and we are very glad to see it become single-family housing again. It was used as a guest house by the University of Michigan for decades, but it has been purchased by a family. We were looking for, as Planning Commission and City Council representatives, Lum and Westfall, we're looking for ways in which to guarantee the protection of this property. And through collaboration with neighbors, with the property owners and city staff, we were able to come to an agreement. This would be doing the city's part to help ensure this family can move into their new home and make sure that the property is protected into perpetuity.
Further discussion of C2? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It's approved. DB1, resolution to approve participation agreement with Ann Arbor Township and appropriate funds not to exceed $315,500 from the Open Space and Parkland Preservation Millage to purchase the development rights of the Stiles Caljigian property. Moved by Councilor Grand, seconded by Councilmember Westfall. Discussion, please, of DB1. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It is approved with 10 council members present, all voting in the affirmative, thus satisfying the 8-vote requirement. Mr. Postma, do we have a closed session today?
We do have a closed session. It is under the Open Meetings Act, and it is for pending litigation and for written attorney-client privileged communication.
Motion please to go into closed session. Moved by Councilmember Grand, seconded by Councilmember Crapel. Discussion? Roll call vote, please, starting with Councilmember Grand.
Councilmember Grand?
Yes.
Councilmember Ackerman?
Yes.
Mayor Taylor?
Yes.
Councilmember Eaton?
Yes.
Councilmember Crapel?
Yes.
Councilmember Orpahowski?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Cosapati?
Yes.
Councilmember Bannister?
Yes.
Councilmember Westfall?
Yes.
Motion carries.
We are in closed session. After a short break. We have a motion, please, to go back into open session. Moved by Councilmember Warpahowski, seconded by Councilmember Crapol. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are back in open session. DC 1, resolution to amend the budget and appropriate funds not to exceed $4.2 million from the general fund balance to affect the city's ownership of 350 South Fifth Avenue in the amount of $4,200,000. Moved by Councilmember Ackerman, seconded by Councilmember Grand. Discussion of DC 1. I guess I'd like to start off a little bit about this. This project comes with a long history, and as one of the folks who was around at the initiation of that history, I wanted to explain a little bit. Back, I guess, in 2012 or so, council decided that it wanted to wanted to sell the OY lot. To do this, we retained a broker, and the broker took in a number of different proposals. Those proposals were all keyed off of the original appraisal amount of $4.2 million. Those appraisals involved a number of folks from the community, including Mr. Dahlman's group, who eventually purchased the site, but also third parties from outside the community who were interested in building units such as a hotel on the site. If I recollect correctly, the second place offeror gave an offer of $5.2 million and a pledge to build a hotel on the site. Mr. Dahlman's team gave us an offer of $5.25 million, along with a pledge to build a property that included a number of different features. That included large plate office, that included open space, that included a grand fountain, that included residential, and included underground parking. During the course of the conversation surrounding the decision, it was requested that Mr. Dahlman, as he moves forward, incorporate his pledge to use this property into the deed for the property, to bind him, if you will, to put forth a site plan, to put forward a building that met the goals, that met the elements that he identified in his communication to the city. Those elements were eventually included in the deed, along with what the purchaser, what Mr. Dahlman identified as an appropriate amount of time, a sufficient amount of time to bring forward a building, to bring forward a site plan to build a building that would meet those various conditions. That time has passed. That time, I guess, was initially January 2018. However, due to his desire to conduct additional environmental review of the site, council at the time extended that to April 18. And here we are today. At April 18, the parcel, we have not received the site plan, which identifies the elements of the included in the deed, and so the right of the city to repurchase the land springs into action. Then that is that right that we are discussing today. The right of the city to repurchase the land is per that initial agreement, per the deed which Mr. Dahlman's group acquiesced to, is at a price of $4.2 million. The site plan, the parcel has over the course of time appreciated and now ranges in anywhere from 7 and change to 12 and change, with a 700 FAR parcel, a 700 FAR structure in accordance with D1 zoning being appraised as according to the appraisers retained by the city, at $9.8 million. In addition, if we are to exercise the right of reverter, if we are to exercise a purchase of the property, the city would have control over the property thereafter. The city would be able to determine the nature of the building built on the site, the use of the building built on the site, the design of the building built on the site. These are elements, in my view, that are appropriate and attractive and in the city's material interest. The city has a goal, I believe, of providing structures downtown that activate downtown, that provide what the city needs. The city needs affordability, the city needs affordable housing, the city needs economic activity downtown. These are things that we are able to affect if we have control. And I believe that the exercise of that control by tendering the offer today would be to our material benefit. And so that is a little bit of context, historical context, and a little bit of the issues and the interests, I think, that are at play here today. And so I'm going to be supporting the resolution, supporting DC 1. Councilmember Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we all appreciate the context and summary. You've been here longer than any of us, and so you could probably recite it in many other stories. This is a vote to decide whether or not we want to have control over one of the most valuable pieces of land in the city of Ann Arbor. Local control means that we, as your representatives, and a supermajority of them, would be deciding the fate of this piece of land. Whether or not a portion of it is dedicated to public open space, whether or not we invest in affordable housing as a community at this location, boils down to whether or not we have control, and we get to make that decision tonight. I think it's as simple as that. I think the dollars and cents make sense. We're talking about paying back $4.2 million after receiving $5.25 million. And while we have an appraised value for this property at $9.8 million, I think that the community would see much more value instead of maximizing the revenue that the city could gain through sale to a private entity, but instead pursuing a public-private partnership to get the maximum value for the community. Again, public open space. Again, affordable housing for our workers downtown who can't afford to live here. This vote tonight allows us to have that conversation. A no vote puts that at risk. So I'll leave it there. I think it's important that we do this now in order to stay on timeline, and I think it's important that we vote yes so we have local control over an incredibly valuable property.
Councilmember Eaton.
Thank you. This particular saga didn't actually start in 2012. It started in 2003 when the city exercised its right of first refusal when the YMCA decided to sell their old building. The city intervened in an attempt to protect 100 units of affordable housing and bought the property, borrowed $3.5 million to buy the property, and then, that was in October of 2003, if I recall correctly, we released a RFP seeking a first we found that the building was decrepit and full of asbestos and had a variety of other problems, and after a long debate over whether we should renovate the building or tear it down, we determined that it should be torn down and sold for development. We let out a RFP. A group called HDC LLC of Novi came in and entered into arrangements with us to build 2 towers on this site with a variety of uses, including some affordable housing, not the single occupant residency that had been there, but some form of affordable housing. And that project kind of dragged on, which seems to be of a kind when the city engages in real estate speculation. And in November of 2007, council pulled the plug on it, ended that relationship with that developer. And by canceling that relationship with that developer, we lost the $1.1 million that we had spent on relocating the people that had been living in that housing that the developer had promised us they'd reimburse us for, but didn't have to once we released them from their project. We also had paid $1 million for the removal of the asbestos and the demolition of the building. So we're up to $5.5 million at this point in time because we had engaged in this real estate speculation by exercising our right of first refusal. Well, when we canceled the deal with that developer, we then proceeded through about 5 years of litigation. with that developer. And finally, on March 30th, 2012, the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in favor of the city. So even though we had a victory in court, it took us 5 years of just sitting on that property, it not being productive, before we moved forward. So that was March of 2012. The loan that we had taken out to buy the Y had a balloon payment due in December of 2013. So early in 2013, council decided that they should put this on the market, and that's approximately when Mr. Dahlman and the others bid on this project. We were able to sell the property to Mr. Dahlman. We were able to pay off our balloon payment that was coming due, and we were able to reach an agreement with Dahlman's company, Fifth Fourth. And that agreement included a lot of requirements beyond just simply building a building. It required mixed use of particular kinds. It required open space of a particular amount, including the inclusion of a grand fountain. It required them to comply with the Design Review Board in a mandatory fashion rather than the usual advisory role of that board. And the price tag was approximately $5.2 million. I'm not going to talk about the relationship between the city and Mr. Dahlman's company during the period from when we agreed to sell it to him and now, because that's all subject of litigation, and I don't think it's appropriate to get into. But I want to emphasize that when we engage in real estate speculation, we don't do well. We need look no further than across the street from this property at the library lot, which we authorized staff to sell last year in April, and that sales agreement has still not been executed. We don't do well when we engage in real estate speculation. This resolution relies on some speculation about the value of this property, value that's placed without the restrictions that we placed on Dahlman's Development Company. And so the idea that we're going to obtain a great profit by taking this property back and then reselling it seems, again, to be pure speculation. But needless to say, if we go ahead and try to revert this property back to our ownership, we are going to engage in prolonged litigation, like we did the last time a development failed on this property. The method that we're going to use to finance this is to use our general fund reserve account. Taking $4.2 million out of our reserve balance is going to drop us from about 17% reserve down to about 13%, which is below our target, which is below a good, healthy organization's reserves. And I think that of itself is a huge risk. That affects our ability to borrow at lower interest rates on other loans. Now, we've received some assurances that it probably won't affect the interest rate on the loans that are proposed in this next resolution, but certainly the period of time when we are dropped below our 15% target reserve account, we are placing our fiscal condition at risk. We've known for quite some time that this building wasn't going to be completed by today. I mean, council members were talking about it 6 months ago in meetings here, and yet here we are on the day when the project needed to be completed, discussing what we need to hurry up and do in order to accomplish what we knew we were going to need to do as long ago as a year. It's rather inexcusable that we put it off to the last minute to have this discussion, especially because we're going to have to spend $4.2 million out of our general reserve account. I don't think it's responsible for us in a fiscal manner to use those reserve account funds for that purpose, in hopes that we'll be able to issue some bonds at a later point in time. So what began in 2003 as an attempt to protect 100 units of affordable housing has really turned into a wildly expensive adventure in real estate speculation. I believe that we should bring this to a close sooner rather than later. I don't want to see years of litigation. I'll vote no on this resolution unless, of course, we agree to postpone it. And so at this point, I'm going to make a motion to postpone this until the next meeting to give our attorneys time to respond to settlement offers that were made to us last Friday. So that's my motion.
Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Bannister. Discussion of the postponement. Councilmember Grand, then Ackerman.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
No,
Brandon
you-
Ackerman. Go for it.
Gosh, I have so much to say about the postponement and everything that was just said just now. Councilmember Eaton presented a fairly convoluted argument as to why we should postpone this with a lot of inaccuracies. So I just wanted, before we speak to the postponement, with the discretion of council, just bring Mr. Crawford up for a question. Because one of Councilmember Eaton's, actually it is related to the postponement, he mentioned that one of his questions for staff that was unresolved was whether or not this would impact our bond rating. Now, Mr. Crawford, and I say this with all due respect, you are one of the most fiscally conservative people I know. And, you protect us well in the city with that attitude, even if it, frustrates some of us sometimes. So that question
Excuse me,
about
point
whether
of-
or not.
Point of order.
Point of order, you spoke
This really
for
isn't
about
about the
7
postponement
minutes
as much
or
as about
10.
my argument to vote no on the main motion. I believe that I deserve a ruling on the point of order.
I have not heard the result of the question and its finality and, its relationship to the postponement. I think we tend, as a council, to be fairly loose as to linking those two things, we tend to be fairly loose as to what constitutes statements with respect to postponements and constitutes statements with respect to the main motion.
Thank you, but I'll be
But
happy to,
please.
time the 3 minutes next time Councilmember Eaton wants to speak. So, Mr. Crawford, one of the unresolved issues that Mr. Eaton brought up for the reason for his postponement was this idea that you would, that by bringing temporarily our reserves, it might affect our bond rating going forward. What's your opinion about that?
At this time, I do not believe it will.
Okay, and can you extrapolate a little bit, or no need?
I believe that if these two resolutions were passed tonight and we went to the market for a bond, that the rating agencies would recognize the totality of our financial picture and the rating on the debt would not be impacted.
Okay, thank you very much, I appreciate it. Councilmember Eaton, I think everyone heard, just basically tried to bribe the council into saying that he will only vote one way if we postpone or don't postpone. I personally will not be bribed in that way, so I will not be supporting the postponement. This couldn't be more straightforward. This is an incredibly just fiscally irresponsible move to make. And I also want to point out that in that statement leading to the postponement, there were statements made about that could just put us in jeopardy in terms of ongoing litigation, and it's completely irresponsible.
Councilmember Ackerman. Further discussion of the postponement? Councilmember Westfall.
I just want to speak to the notion about, excuse me, speculation. I know at this table before my time, there was discussions about the Edwards Brothers property. And, you know, should we or shouldn't we make a play to control that land and potentially work something out with U of M? And, you know, I think respectable people differed on whether that was a good tactic. I think with what I differentiate with this arrangement is that it was always contemplated that we would either get a building or take it back so we can get a building. Unfortunately, you know, the cynics proved correct in that there didn't seem to be any impetus to create a building here. So I just want to thank staff for structuring this deal this way. I'm fully supportive of taking the property back and put it to good use. I was part of the Connecting William Street process where we, you know, engaged the public, and I think an unprecedentedly large public engagement process to see what people's visions were for all the properties along near William Street. And, you know, the library lot notwithstanding, there's still, you know, there was a lot of disagreement about that, some degree disagreement about that. The public was very straightforward about what they envisioned for this and Palio and Klein lot. And to me, you know, maintaining control of this property is of utmost importance to the city. Yeah, it's messy. Even when these are in private hands, as we've seen around downtown, a lot of private owners leave them as parking lots for decades, and that's unfortunate. I'm hopeful we can do better, but these things take time, and I see only downsides to not controlling this property, both with regard to the community's vision for their downtown, as well as pure fiscal responsibility.
On the postponement, Councilmember Ackerman.
On the postponement, only that this keeps us on timeline.
Councilmember Kalasapathy.
Yeah. Just a couple of points. I was at council when the Edwards property came for the first right of refusal for us to buy the property, and we did have a very kind of an aggressive broker who said we could make millions of dollars if we purchased that back. There could be a big mall, we could build so many things, and yeah, majority of us at that point too decided not to buy it back because we were not in the business of land speculation. And I mean, I wouldn't want to bet on either land prices or the stock market at this point in time. This morning I was listening to the news. China is imposing an additional $5 billion of tariffs. I know it's a drop in the bucket, but the kind of politics we have right now, I wouldn't want to speculate on the land market or the stock market at this point. And I voted no at for the Edwards Brothers project too. What I remember about selling this property to Mr. Dahlman was Mr. Steve Powers met with all city council members and kind of understood what our vision and what the residents we were representing wanted, and then worked with the broker to come up with the scale of a property with more public space and fountain and whatever we basically couldn't have on the library lot. And just because something is going to come back to us, I don't feel that we are going to have all these, even though technically we have control. It seems like whenever we see a property, the only argument that comes up is we need to build as dense as possible. When you build, it's going to be, we are going to giving up. The next argument we'll be having if we bought this property is, if we don't have 18-story here, we'll be leaving 2 million on the table. That'll be against our people. I mean, it's the same argument that keeps coming up, that we are somehow or other not being responsible by having this heavy dense development that's going to bring in, I mean, look at the 3-4 properties we voted on the last 6 months. It was about dollars. How much extra tax dollars? And we also know tax dollars just doesn't come in free. There are other costs, right? Roads get ripped up, additional services, water, sewer. So it's not like there's this free money sitting there. So I don't see this as just like, oh, there's this land, we're going to buy it and sell it for $9.8 million, because at that point, I know the argument would be to have the biggest, massive, most densely buildable property. People don't have a voice in this city. No, they can come and, I mean, look at the public hearings we had for the library lot. Did we listen? No. So I have a very different view of this slam dunker kind of a deal that's sitting there, and we are leaving. Thank you.
Further discussion on the postponement? Roll call vote, please, start with Councilor Grand. This is on the postponement.
Councilmember Graham?
No.
Councilmember Ackerman?
No.
Mayor Taylor?
No.
Councilmember Eaton?
Yes.
Councilmember Crapel?
No.
Councilmember Warpowski?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
No.
Councilmember Kalasapathy?
Yes.
Councilmember Bannister?
Yes.
Councilmember Westfall?
No.
Motion fails.
Further discussion on the main motion, I have Councilmember Graham, then Councilmember Ackerman.
On the main motion.
You can go later if you wish.
No, I think I'll just come back to saying that this is, in spite of efforts to make this sound convoluted or speculative, this is really straightforward. We had a contract. The contract stated that if there was not a property with a certificate of occupancy and with this, according to the stipulations, that we would buy it back for $4.2 million, for not only less than it was sold to us, but less than it was worth. That was money that was put into place to protect our city's interests. It's almost like a rent payment, if you will, of about $1 million. There are, and it's so straightforward. So to speak of this as speculative is just ridiculous. The property has been assessed. This isn't phony science. We had an assessor. The assessor assessed the property, and the property was assessed, if you take the middle point, at almost $10 million. So, pretty simple math, 4.2 million is a lot less than 9.8 million. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to just go and sell it to the highest bidder. It means that we as a council and as a community have the right to determine what the value is. But we can't determine what the value is and what different trade-offs are worth unless we own the property. I don't understand why, given the stipulations that were placed on this contract previously, why we would just give that up, why we wouldn't take control of the property for the price that we have. It's nonsensical to me.
Councilmember Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The term speculative development or speculative construction can oftentimes get thrown around in this community. It's a scary buzzword, but it actually has a definition. Speculative development is taking a piece of property, constructing something without any proven demand. And there's a couple reasons why this isn't speculative development. The first is we're not constructing anything. We're just simply taking ownership back to maintain a public asset and maintain local control over this land. That is not speculative development, is not construction. Second, speculative assumes that there isn't a proven market, and we have a proven market. We have the opportunity to purchase this land back for $4.2 million. It was given to us for $5.25. That is a proven market in 2013 during an economic recovery, of which we're on the other end. We'll see what happens in the coming months. But we got 2 bids for $5.2 million. 2 different bids for $5.2 million in 2013 in a weaker economy. That is a proven market. And now we're looking at estimates of $9.8 million. That's a huge increase in value. And that doesn't come out of nowhere. We proved that we could sell the library lot for 10 million. That's a proven market. And the beautiful thing about land and owning it and having local control and allowing the taxpayers to determine its outcome is that land has no horizon. We don't need to make a quick buck off of this in the next year. If we have local control over this asset, we get to determine its future when it is right. So that may mean waiting for another economic cycle and getting maximum value out of it. Or it could mean a public-private partnership in the near future where we don't see the benefit of all that $9.8 million, but we do see tremendous value in terms of public gathering space, in terms of affordable housing. We don't get to have those conversations unless we vote yes tonight. And a vote no tonight is closing the door on an opportunity to control this land and control whether or not it becomes a community asset, not just another piece of private property to be developed privately.
Councilmember Smith.
Thank you. You know, I'm not going to take too long here, but, you know, if we exercise the reversion clause here, you know, I want to be really clear that our goal as a city is not profit. Speculative development, the goal is profit. Our goal is to be able to leverage city assets, in this case land, to accomplish goals that have been set by the people in our community. That's affordable housing, it's public spaces, it's energy efficiency, it's beauty. This is a tool that we can use an asset that we can leverage to accomplish those things. As Councilmember Ackerman said, it's likely not even this council that will make the decision about what those things are, but this is controlling this asset is a critical tool that we have to accomplish those goals. Without it, we are, you know, fighting with both hands tied behind our back. You know, voting no on this is basically, as Councilman Ackerman said, you know, it's closing the door on this as using this as an asset, which I think is so incredibly fiscally irresponsible that it defies my imagination. And I think, you know, ultimately, you know, some of what's been said by some of my colleagues is missing the point here. You know, we need to vote on this reverter so we can continue to work to make sure that what gets built at this site is what the citizens have said that they want. And that was what was in this contract. And if we decide not to vote to exercise this reversion, we're not following through on what the citizens have said that they want. So I just want to be very clear about what those votes mean and what they say to our public, that, you know, doesn't matter. And I think that that's not true. And I certainly urge all of my colleagues who are considering voting no on this to reevaluate their positions.
Councilmember Warpahowski.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. Couple of points. The option that the city had to purchase back the Edwards Brothers property using our right of first refusal has been brought up. That was in many ways the inverse. You know, and I voted no on that decision. Because that was the flip side of what this was. The Edwards Brother property, the University of Michigan was paying above market rate to acquire the property, and so the only way we would have had a chance of making good on an investment to reacquire that property would have been if we zoned it in a way that was not currently allowed for it by the master plan. And even then, it would still take years, if not decades, to recoup our purchase price over the taxes. That was a place where we would have been buying high because the university had such a high bid. Mm-hmm. This is a situation where, and I think Councilmember Grand's rent characterization is good. Because of the rent of this site sitting vacant, we have an opportunity to buy low. The difference between the $4.2 million and the $9.8 million for that 700% sort of mid-range FAR is $5.6 million. There's a lot of public good we could do for affordable housing, for streetlights, maybe even for potholes with that money. Even if it's off, even if it's significantly off, we are in a strong position here. I think our risk is low for this purchase where it was extremely high for the other Edwards Brothers purchase. Councilmember Kalasapathy raised the the potential that if we exercise the right of reversion, we might end up selling it for somebody who would build a big building there. None of the stipulations we put on the sales agreement, none of the stipulations that Mr. Dahlman offered limited the site of what he would build there. He could build right up to the height limit on this site. That's not a restriction that he put forward or that we asked for. If we want to limit the height on this building, the way to get to that height limit is to reacquire and to work that out through the next round. Which brings to the point, I want to agree with something that Councilmember Eaton said. He pointed out how in our attempts to address, when the city's trying to figure out how to deal with the property, we've had a lot of different interests that we've been trying to work through. Working through these has taken years, different terms of council. It's been difficult, and that push and pull of the different interests makes us, it does change the dynamic for the city to decide what to do with the property. We move more slowly and more deliberately, usually, than a for-profit developer does. Not all for-profit developers, but in most cases. I think that deliberative process is overall to our advantage, although it does have its trade-offs. For me, I will support this resolution because I think even if we sort of discount that $5.6 million and if maybe we don't realize that whole thing, the chance that we'll be able to come out ahead and put that money to the service of the community, or better serve the community by putting different, by figuring out what exactly we want for this site. I think there's a lot of value we could have here and a lot of ways that this site could better serve our community.
Councilmember Crapel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll keep my comments somewhat brief too, since a number of the points have been brought up. I guess I'm not as concerned about what happened 15 years ago or 10 years ago, because that's not the current situation in the city. It's not the current council we have. It's not the current economic conditions that we're looking at now as we were 10 or 15 years ago. I think it's to the city's advantage to be able to retain this property, because I think it provides options going forward. It doesn't, without it, there are no next arguments about what we want to put there. There are no next discussions on it. There is no more public debate on it about what we want. One thing that I find interesting is none of the proponents that have been for outdoor park on the library lot have even spoken up about the potential of purchasing this land, getting it back, and using it for that. The interest seems to be more for letting it go, and we'll criticize the decision to sell the Y lot, which I don't agree with. I don't think this is risky, especially since we're paying less than what we did in 2013. I think if there is a collapse in 2 months from now and the economy goes south, I think we're still in a good position, because we're in a position we can hold the property, we can use it for parking, we can use it for things for the public good, that if it's in the private hands, we won't be able to do that. And we may not be able to have anything on that property at all for 10, 15 years, or until that developer decides to do something with it. I think having our control is essential. I think it's been hit on by a number of the council members here. I think we can use it. We have the potential to use it for any number of public goods, whether that's selling and building a building or whether it's for affordable housing. We at least are in a position to have those discussions, and I think that's important. And I think that's what ultimately we have to look out. What is the best value, and what is the best interest of the taxpayers? And I think letting the property go isn't that. I don't think it is not letting the taxpayers be able to benefit from this in some ways in the future is a good decision at all. Thank you.
Further discussion? Councilmember Westfall.
Thank you. I guess I'll just say, paint me surprised that we're having such a protracted conversation about this. I mean, it reminds me of, you know, when I was watching from, not at the council table, the vote on the Foundry, where we had a by right building that, had it been denied, many experts opined that would have landed us in a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. And, you know, had that decision gone a different way, I don't think we'd be having this conversation. I think we'd be a lot more cautious about financial repercussions of our decisions. To me, that there is no downside to reacquiring this property. If we don't live up to our part of the contract, if we don't reacquire, we lose control and effectively gift a private entity a huge sum. Even if the market value on this property drops 50%, which is, I would venture to say, unthinkable in downtown, the taxpayers still make money off the resale, eventual resale of this. I'm frankly just really surprised we're having this conversation.
Further discussion? Councilmember Bannister.
Yes. Well, as the newest member of council, I've been absorbing a lot of this information over the last few days, and I just maybe make a comment that I wish, you know, in the last year, a year ago, we sold the library lot before I was on council, you know, to the core spaces, and then in December, we rezoned 1140 Broadway from a PUD to by right development. So I wish these arguments that I'm hearing from my colleagues tonight about public gathering spaces, affordable housing, community assets, beauty, aesthetic, not giving big gifts to private entities. It seems ironic as a newcomer to the council that we weren't hearing these comments at these, well, we were approving core spaces on the library lot, or the mass that we're getting, the outsized building down at 1140 Broadway. So I guess that's just a comment that I'm left here wondering what's going on. Because if we want to talk about what's the best value and interest of the taxpayers, why are we just talking about that today? You know, if we're really worried about developers, then we should be raising, and an affordable housing, I would like to see those issues raised. I would like to see discussion of, if we don't want 180-foot buildings, let's talk about our zoning. And if we really want senior housing, let's talk about that. So why we're hanging it all right now tonight on this development is confusing to me. It's ironic, and that's just my comment.
Councilmember Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Councilmember Bannister, I appreciate you being direct and to the point. I think it is particularly confusing because all of a sudden the votes are switching, right? The different characters are responding differently to a different situation. These are very different votes. And the scenario here is a yes vote allows us to buy this back and have local control and have negotiating power. A no vote gives it to a private developer to build a 180-foot building. If the situation had been applied to the core spaces and we were going to just gift it to a private developer, they could have parceled it off. They could have built 2 buildings that were 180 feet. But instead, we had negotiating power, and we were able to get 12,000 square feet of public plaza. We were able to get dedicated affordable housing units within the building. We were able to, you know, have a say in what was developed there. Had we just gone the other direction, going the direction that we could go tonight with a no vote, we would have just been gifting it to a private developer to parcel off and build a lot denser and with a lot less community input. So while the result may not have been what you wanted and what some community members wanted on the core spaces, it could have been a lot worse if we go down this path, or we went down a similar path. And now we're starting from scratch on a different property, a property that isn't built above an underground parking structure. We're having a conversation about a piece of land that has historically in this community been housing for those people who are most vulnerable. And we have the opportunity to live up to what I believe is a community promise, to do that, to do something better again. And while I'm one member of council, I think it's on us to push that conversation forward, but we need to have the leverage, we need to have control of the land to push that conversation forward. And that's a yes vote tonight.
Further discussion? Roll call vote, please, starting with Councilmember Grand.
Councilmember Grand?
Yes.
Councilmember Ackerman?
Yes.
Mayor Taylor?
Yes.
Councilmember Eaton?
No.
Councilmember Crapel?
Yes.
Councilmember Warpahowski?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Kalasapati?
No.
Councilmember Bannister?
No.
Councilmember Westfall?
Since I can count the votes now and seeing where this is headed, since we don't have a full complement of council, I would, to preserve the control to bring this back for reconsideration, I will vote no, and ask that we have a recess.
The motion fails.
Before we move on to DC2, let us take a short break. Break. Councilmember Westfall.
I'd like to move for reconsideration of DC 1.
Procedurally, does that get a second?
I believe anybody who voted on the negative side of that can bring it back. Whether you need a second or not, I don't believe so. I think it's brought back.
Fair enough.
But yes, you need to vote on the reconsideration.
All right, so do you wish to explicate the reason for the reconsideration?
I'd like to postpone this for the purpose of bringing it back when we have a full,
To table it until we
have a full complement of council.
Fair enough, all right. Is there a second on the postponement? Second by Councilmember Ackerman. Discussion of the reconsideration, sorry. Roll call vote, please, starting with Councilmember Grand on the reconsideration. Is this bringing it back for reconsideration, or is this is whether or not to put it on the floor for reconsideration?
To bring it back for reconsideration.
Thank you.
Do we have a date for the meeting? For
Well,
next
this is just to
meeting?
do this presently, and then there'll be, I believe, the next step is to seek it being tabled. So, roll call vote, please, starting with Councilmember Grand on the motion to reconsider.
Councilmember Grand?
Yes.
Councilmember Ackerman?
Yes.
Mayor Taylor?
Yes.
Councilmember Eaton?
Yes.
Councilmember Crapo?
Yes.
Councilmember Rorbachowski?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Cosapati?
Yes.
Councilmember Bannister?
Yes.
Councilmember Westfall?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Does it need to be removed?
Yes, it's removed. It's now back here, and therefore, you would need to,
Make
it's
my
open
motion.
up. You can do whatever you want, but you can have a motion if you'd like.
Councilmember
It's on the
Westphal.
floor now.
Motion.
Move to postpone this to the next meeting.
Postpone or table?
Table.
Let's move it postponed to our next meeting. Second by Councilmember Eaton. Discussion?
Will that be next Monday or 2 weeks?
2 weeks,
Next regular.
the 16th. Is it the 16th?
Yes.
I think you could do the next meeting, and you could do it, you could preserve your ability to have a special meeting.
Thank you very much. So postponed until our next meeting.
Correct.
Discussion of postponement? Roll call vote, please, starting. Pardon me.
Well, I won't be there, member, at the 9th.
Understood. If it's any consolation, understanding that you voted no here, your absence will always count as a no vote.
Okay.
That votes need, measures need yeses in order to get over, it's not a percentage. Discussion of the postponement. Discussion of the postponement.
Right, but in the normal course of action, we're talking about postponement to the 16th, unless there
Unless
is
we
a
call it
special meeting
special meeting
called,
prior.
which probably wouldn't be, well, okay.
Roll call vote, please, starting with Councilmember Grand, unless there are questions. Councilmember Grand.
Councilmember Grand?
Yes.
Councilmember Ackerman?
Yes.
Mayor Taylor?
Yes.
Councilmember Eaton?
Yes.
Councilmember Crapo?
Yes.
Councilmember Rorbachowski?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Cosapati?
Yes.
Councilmember Bannister?
Yes.
Councilmember Westfall?
Yes.
Councilmember Long? Motion carries.
DC 2, resolution authorizing notice and issuance of general obligation bonds, 350 South Fifth Avenue, moved by Councilmember Crapo, second by Councilmember Smith. Discussion of DC 2, let's give it to Councilmember Westfall for the postponement to the next meeting. Sorry, thank you. Councilmember Smith.
Being that this is inherently tied to what we just postponed until our next meeting, I would offer a motion to postpone this item till our next meeting.
Seconded by Councilmember Rorbachowski. Discussion? Yes, Councilmember Westfall.
Thank you. So this is not to actually vote to issue, just to authorize notice, potentially, correct. So I'm assuming they would not be noticed or issued in staff's discretion.
The current motion is to postpone until our next meeting.
I guess my question is whether we need to do that. Obviously, staff wouldn't exercise this if we voted to in the affirmative, it just would fail to be exercised. I'm just trying to shorten up the next meeting.
Further discussion? All in favor of the postponement?
Aye.
All opposed? It is postponed. Are there communications today for our city attorney?
No?
We have before us the clerk's report of communications, petitions, and referrals. May I have a motion, please? Moved by Councilor Graham, seconded by Councilor Ackerman. Discussion of the clerk's report. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The clerk's report is approved. We now come to public comment general time. Public comment general time is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to council and the community about matters of municipal interest. To speak at public comment to general time, one need not have signed up in advance. Speakers have 3 minutes in which to speak, so please pay close attention to the time clock. As a matter of courtesy, we may have only one person speaking at a time. And finally, if you require assistance in speaking before council, we'd be delighted to provide it to you. Is there anyone who'd like to speak at public comment?
Hi, my name is Edward Vilmetti. Since we were trying to tell a complete story of the why, I wanted to make sure that one piece of the puzzle didn't go unmentioned. Back in 2003, the AATA, now the AAATA, offered to purchase this property, and the city exercised its right of first refusal to take ownership. If the AATA had purchased it at that time, you wouldn't all be discussing this at the moment, and I think our downtown transit situation would have been materially better. So it's not, we can't unwind 15 years worth of decisions at a moment's notice, but just to know that this parcel didn't have to turn out this way, and it's really not a good sign when parking downtown is seen as one of the highest and best uses of it. I certainly hope that we get a better solution than a surface parking lot out of this whole mess. Thank you.
Further, is there anyone else who'd like to speak at public comment? Seeing no one, public comment is closed. Are there communications from council? Councilmember Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to talk about the vote that just happened. I think members of council who voted no, barring Councilmember Westfall, voted against the interests of the public. They voted no as a means to give more authority and flexibility to a private developer at the expense of local control over what happens there. I think as this conversation progresses, constituents should be asking tough questions, asking questions that compare their vote tonight and what they said about the role of government compared to what they've said publicly, how they voted previously, and perhaps most importantly, taking a look at campaign contributions. This is a bizarre vote, and I can't stress that enough. I'm very confused about why colleagues would vote against what their stated interests have been in the past with respect to this property and this property owner.
Further communication from council.
Add one comment on that about campaign contributions. I would like to mention that I did receive a $1,000 donation from Mr. Dahlman last year, which I promptly returned to him. So you will find in my campaign finance forms no contributions from developers. Thank you.
Good. Further communication from council. Do we have another closed session, Mr. Postema?
If you would like one, I can arrange a short, medium, or long one, but you also could adjourn tonight and watch a basketball game.
Thank you.
May I have a motion to adjourn, please? Moved by Councilmember Grand, second by Councilmember Warpahowski. Discussion. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned.